All right, I said we would begin today with kind of a recap of James I. He tended to be pretty Scottish because he was Scottish. That was alienating to his English subjects. The English have not historically been large fans of the Scots, and now to be ruled by one who kind of flaunts his Scottishness and rubs their noses in it is a little grating for them. Yes, sure.
The English are used to ruling the Scottish, not be ruled by the Scottish.
Well, you can't exactly say that the English are used to ruling the Scottish. By this point in history, it's been 300 years since the English ruled the Scots. If you're thinking back to the days of William Wallace, is that what you're hearkening back to? Yeah, that's not recent history at this point. James I spent a lot of time with his close male companions. They also tended to be Scottish, and this gave the English a lot of reasons to raise both of their eyebrows very high. I'm not saying anything definitive. I'm just saying he spent a lot of time with his favorite men at court. He was very skillful at political compromise. The fact that he worked so hard at political compromise made his 20-plus year reign seem like a very stable one. There was not a lot of turmoil or upheaval. The problem with that is that that's a bit of a fallacy. He gave up a lot of power to Parliament in those compromises to keep England feeling stable. Okay? He weakened the monarchy. That is significant, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on monarchs to follow. In this chapter about absolutist monarchs, this first monarch we're talking about weakens himself. That's not at all in the line of Philip II or Louis XIV, is it? Seems like it doesn't make sense. At the same time, he believes himself thoroughly to be a divine right absolutist. In his mind, in his heart, that is what he is. He is an absolute monarch by divine right. He proclaimed, quote, "Smoking is hateful to the nose, harmful to the brain, and dangerous to the lungs." He said, not good, right? And yet, what was Jamestown's primary export to England? Tobacco. He would not use it himself. He also said, quote, "Kings are justly called gods, for they exercise a manner or resemblance of divine power upon earth." What better example of, I think, I'm a divine right absolute monarch, than to call yourself a god because you exercise divine power on earth? You would look at somebody today who said that and go, wow, aren't they a little full of themselves? It's perfectly legitimate for James to say that back then. James was not at all respectful of his royal subjects. The people of England and their worries, their concerns, their desires mattered not one bit to him, and in his mind, as a divine right absolute monarch, he didn't need to care about them. In fact, when one of his advisors brought him some complaints from his subjects, he said, quote, "God's wounds! I will pull down my breeches and they shall see my arse." He's saying, he's going to moon them because that's exactly how much he cares about what they're worried about. He's the king. He gets to decide what should be bothering them. In putting down the gunpowder plot, he shows how strong he is as a monarch. In founding Jamestown, he shows how powerful he is as a monarch, and he ensures a flow of income into the economy, because Jamestown is the first step towards turning Britain into what kind of economic system? Mercantilist. All right. Good. Shall we move on to another? Charles I. Another 25 years, 1625 to 1649. Okay. We have to talk about some folks surrounding Charles before we can actually talk about him. This is George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham. George here had been one of James's favorites. Okay, he'd been one of those guys that James hung out with a bit over much. Okay. He rose very rapidly up the ranks of nobility to the Duke, and he is the first guy with no noble or royal blood whatsoever to be elevated that high. So that should illustrate for you exactly how much of a favorite he was of King James. Yes?
What does it mean if you're a duke?
A duke is the highest rank of nobility you can get. Okay? It's the next best thing to being a prince. Okay? The Duke of Buckingham. Have you heard Buckingham before?
Buckingham Palace.
Uh-huh. So this is a powerful person. Okay. In his role as advisor to the king, he attempts to arrange a marriage between Charles, okay, and the Infanta Maria of Spain. He wants to join England and Spain together because that would mean peace. And it's only been a little while since that whole Spanish Armada mess, right? 1588. That wasn't real happy time for England. The problem with that marriage is that in order to carry it out, Spain would have demanded that England pass a law saying that it would tolerate Catholics. And England at this point in time is not going to go there. So the marriage is going to fall through. Villiers cannot see that, so he actually gets on a ship and sails to Spain to try and talk them into it. He feels snubbed. He feels that the Spanish are rude to him. They don't recognize him as being as important as he is. I mean, after all, he is a favorite of the king. Okay? He's trying to negotiate a marriage with the crown prince of England and their crown princess. And they don't kiss his feet as much as he would like. So he comes back and he's like, Spanish, let's kill them. Let's go to war. He comes back and he is actively campaigning for England to go to war with Spain. James had tried to avoid war. In fact, that's the whole reason he summoned the Parliament in 1621 towards the end of his reign. Okay? So that's backstory. So the Infanta of Spain has said no. Enter Henrietta Maria of France. She's actually a pretty girl, isn't she? Yeah. Needs a little,
It's a little sun.
yeah. But at that point in time, if you had sun on your skin, if you were tan, what did that mean? It meant you had to be out in the sun because you were working in the field. So the more pure white, the more alabaster your skin, the wealthier and more powerful you were because you didn't have to go outside for anything. Okay? Make sense? Yes, sure.
Didn't rich people enjoy going outside once in a while, just as much as?
Oh, true, but yes, she would have been under a parasol. She would have kept the sun off of her face. Okay. All right. Charles is going to marry this French princess in 1624, right before he takes the throne, right before his daddy dies. Okay, he comes to the throne in 1625, so he's a newlywed. This isn't just a marriage. There's a treaty that goes along with it, and some concessions have to be made. After all, she is Catholic, and Charles is Protestant. So Henrietta Maria and her household are all allowed to practice Catholicism. And when I say and her household, that's her aides, her maids, her personal attendants. They're all going to come with her from France. She speaks French. She wants some people to talk to attend to her, who know her. Okay. England has to agree to suspend its laws currently in place against English Catholics. So that law that had banned Catholic priests and Jesuits from England, all of the restrictions placed upon Catholics, the law that said you had to attend Anglican services or you were going to be taxed, all of that has to go away according to this marriage treaty. Okay? Charles and Henrietta Maria did not get along. They fought like the English and French. They fought like cats and dogs. They did not get along at all. After about 2 years, Charles has kind of had it. And he says, "Woman, you're staying here, but all them," referring to her household, "they're going home." Once she wasn't surrounded by her countrymen, she learned to speak English. She couldn't retreat to them and run to them to go, "Oh, my husband," blah, blah, blah. And they started actually getting along and operating more as a married couple. Sherman.
Would it have been a really awkward marriage if they didn't even speak the same language?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so now, Chuck and his biggest nemesis, Parliament. Dun dun dun. In 1624, when the Duke of Buckingham comes back from Spain on his "the Spanish suck, let's kill them all" rant, Parliament votes 300,000 pounds, that's the symbol for the English pound, okay, to prepare for war. Money to be spent getting ready, recruiting the army, updating the ships, updating weaponry, okay? We're going to go to war. If we give you 300,000 to prepare for war, Mr. Arkfeld, do you have FCS? Do you have FCS? Fascinating crotch syndrome? Put your phone away. If we're ready to go to war, and to prep for that war, we're going to spend 300,000 pounds. Wouldn't you think the next year we're ready to go to war? Is war less expensive than preparation for war? What? Wouldn't you expect that number to double to go to war? Parliament only gives them $140,000. Here's why. By 1625, Chuck has married a Catholic princess. and he suspended the anti-Catholic laws in order to do so. And Parliament's going, not sure we trust you, because you had assured us that we're a Protestant nation, but you just married a Catholic princess, let a whole bunch of her Catholic friends into town, said they could be Catholic, you're being nicer to all the Catholics who are already here. And then they point out that they're not real clear exactly on how that first £300,000 got spent, because it doesn't look to them like England's any more ready for war this year than they were last year, and yet that £300,000 is gone. Okay, just gone. So they say, we're not going to back that until you show us something. All right, what is tonnage and poundage? What is tonnage and poundage? Usually, the King of England gets to collect all of the customs duties. That's all of the taxes on things that are imported into England. This is a huge source of revenue for the king's personal purse, his private bank account. Okay? But that is something that is granted to him by Parliament. The House of Commons says to Charles, we're not going to grant you indefinite tonnage and poundage. We're going to give it to you for a year. How does the king feel about this? He, believing himself to be an absolute divine right monarch, thinks that he is entitled to that income and should not have to get permission from Parliament to collect what is rightfully his due. Does this make sense? Okay. It is as though in your house you have always had permission to go to the kitchen and open any cupboard or the refrigerator and extract from it whatever food you would like and eat it. And then one day you walk into the kitchen and Mom says, "What do you think you're doing?" And you're like, "I'm hungry. I was going to look for something in the fridge." And Mom says, well, I suppose this week you can pick food for yourself, but we'll talk again. And you're like, what? I've always been able to, what happened? Charles is in much the same situation. What do you mean I don't just get this? Okay? It is the House of Commons, the lower house, the house elected by the people, that says 1 year. The House of Lords, the nobility, who, by the way, get their titles from the king and keep their titles at the whim of the king, the House of Lords says, this is an insult and an outrage, and we will not agree to this law. Charles, not willing to rely on the House of Lords to block the House of Commons, dissolves Parliament. Says, go home, the lot of you. Forget it. And so without parliamentary authority, he goes out and just takes the tonnage and poundage on his own. Is he divine right absolute monarch? He has just dissolved Parliament and said, I rule on my own. Or, in the vernacular of our day, I do what I want. Okay? That would be pretty absolutist. Isaiah. It is the taxes collected on imports, on trade. It is the tax is done by weight, by tonnage and poundage. Okay? All right. Now, we're not done with Spain. Just because Parliament doesn't believe that Charles is going to fight doesn't mean he's not going to fight. Cadiz, Spain. that first 300,000 that Parliament voted, it had been spent retrofitting the Navy. So King Charles I and the Duke of Buckingham send the Navy to Spain to take down the Spanish fleet. Now, they're not sent alone. They go in conjunction with the Dutch. The Dutch have all kinds of reasons to want to see Spain suffer, right? Didn't the Netherlands used to be part of Spain? Didn't Philip try to force the Netherlands to remain Catholic? And they said, stick it in your ear, and have been fighting a war, right? Spain has persecuted them. Spain gifted them with that thing called the Spanish Inquisition. The Dutch have not forgotten that, and so they're willing to take the hurt down to Spain a little bit. Isn't this a great piece of artwork here? Look at the combined fleet, ready to attack. Okay. Here's Cadiz. Look at the fleet. Okay. The English ships are mostly merchant vessels. These are trading ships. Think about the difference between an aircraft carrier or a battleship and an oil tanker today. Okay? Slightly different. Is an oil tanker with a couple of cannons on it going to be as effective as part of your battle fleet as a custom-built warship? No. But a large fleet, regardless of what it's made up, makes up for some of its weaknesses in the wow factor, in the, oh my gosh, that's a gigantic navy, I think I just wet my pants kind of factor for the enemy, right? Sherman?
It sounds like England is making the same mistakes Spain made.
Oh, don't jump to conclusions, Sherman. Don't jump to conclusions. Now, because the captains of those English merchant ships knew that they were merchant ships and not warships, they were in a hurry to get to Spain, to land their soldiers, and get out to protect their ships. So they do just that. They dropped the soldiers off, and then they got out. When they dropped the soldiers off, they dropped them off without food or water or additional supplies. Is this a recipe for success? Not really. Okay. So the military commander on the land, a guy by the name of Sir Cecil, says, uh-oh, I have a lot of hungry and thirsty troops here. They're in the port of Cadiz, a Spanish city, and there on the pier is a whole bunch of stuff that was getting ready to be exported, including lots and lots and lots of casks of wine. Sir Cecil says, I can't have a bunch of soldiers dropping from dehydration, so he allows them to open the casks of wine. You have to wait and find out what happens until Monday. We're going to push that quiz back.